Welcome to episode 6, the last episode of Managing University Life. This episode is called Professional Communication. Some speech acts are performative. They are simply doing what we are supposed to do in obeying a social expectation. We say "How are you?" in English, without really wanting to know all the details. Some people go through life treating all conversations as merely fulfilling a social expectation. I've seen students who delivered a presentation that no one could actually hear because the student mumbled and didn't make eye contact. The student completed an assignment, but there was no real communication because no one else could hear anything. So the most obvious thing we need to say about communication is that it requires that someone speaks and that someone hears it. And if the information does not pass from one to the other, no communication has happened. So let's repeat this. Communication is not one person speaking or writing. It requires both transmission and reception of the message.
Communicating is first and foremost trying to share some idea. You might have some idea or something in your mind, and essentially you're trying to get that into the other person's mind. If we look a little deeper, the message that you're trying to say, the context can deal with several things. The context includes not only the way in which you're communicating, such as by chat message, SMS, phone call, email, and so on, but the context can also include the specifics of the situation that you are speaking or writing about.
So now communication is getting more complicated than we first thought. There are qualities of the message, its context, and the relationship of the two parties.
Most esteemed, honorable Professor Number 1. Yo, dude. What's up?
Let's return to the basic concept of communication. It's not a solitary act where the only important thing is your performance. Communication doesn't happen unless other people receive the message. We talked about body language in episode 5, but it's also a big part of communication. Think of it as another carrier of information, like a computer file with an audio track and a video track. What you are saying is the audio track, and what you are doing with your body is the video. If you're distracting people by fidgeting or moving around nervously, your video track is undermining what you are conveying with your voice.
To summarize, good vocal and verbal communication involves awareness of 1. The message, 2. The situation, and 3. Non-verbal communication, such as body language. Good presenters and conversationalists are also good listeners. They pay attention to whether the other person or the audience is understanding what they are saying.
Some extra advice for better presentation. Make yourself the center of the presentation, not the PowerPoint. If the PowerPoint contains all the text, why are you even there? Use only a little text and mostly graphics so that the audience looks at you. If the audience is only reading slides while you also read off the screen, then they are more likely to become bored. PowerPoint is designed to be a graphic medium, not a textual one. Use big fonts and big pictures so that the audience is mostly looking at you, which is where they should be looking. Typically, people spend too much time preparing slides and not enough time thinking about their delivery. For better communication, look at how your audience is receiving your message. If they look confused, you might slow down. If they look bored or suddenly everyone needs to go to the bathroom, speed up. Read the body language your audience is giving you and react accordingly.
This portion of our video will talk about communicating with people when you don't get to see their face. As you're writing your email, and especially before you click that send button, ask yourself a few questions about what you've written. What is it that you want to accomplish? And therefore, what words do you need to choose? If your goal is getting specific information about an assignment, well, write a specific question. If you know some general idea about what the assignment is, but perhaps you don't know the length of the assignment or some other rules about how it should be formatted when it's typed, then you need to ask a question about that. Of course, you also want to consider, as you're composing your email, what you hope the reader will do after they read your email. If you want them to reply, then say something at the end like, I look forward to hearing from you about blah, blah, blah. If you simply want them to meet you at a certain time, then mention that. Whatever you need them to do, the last thing you say might be better if it is related to that. Finally, give it one scan to be sure you're not using anything appropriate. Avoid using emoticons and things like that. It's often been said, especially by Koreans, that English has no respectful language. There is respectful language in English. And there are ways that you can write an email which would be very impolite. And there are ways you can write an email which would be super and unnecessarily polite. When you're speaking, you often might use casual, informal language. In talking with someone, you might say to them, oh, yeah, I got it, sure, I'll do that. But when you're writing an email, then you would want to say, okay, I understand what needs to be done, and don't worry, I'll do it. There are formal and informal ways to write in English. On your screen now, you can see a formally written email. It doesn't use slang. It shows a degree of respect for the person who's reading it. It starts with a nice opening. The email goes on to say what is the goal of the email or what is the main idea. And the email also mentions there are files attached, so please download and review them. In this sample, we've got some cutesy misspellings, we've got little emoticons, entirely too many exclamation marks. One is okay, more than one is not. Let's look at sending text messages. Even though you may stay up late at night to do work, it's not guaranteed that your professor will. And it's just a general rule of thumb to not contact people late in the evening. If you have a query at that time, send them an email instead, but don't send them a text message or call them. Be efficient. In the first message, go ahead and say your name, maybe mention what class you take with that person or what it is you're writing about. Since you're contacting that person, then okay, know that you have the responsibility to manage the conversation. You're the one who started it. So if you want to know something, then ask them. Here's an example of a suitable text message. They've told their name, what class they happen to be taking with this professor, and what they want to know. If you write a text message like this, you're being efficient, you're getting the information you need without taking a lot of steps, and you're also showing your competence as a communicator. Notice that this person has sent 3 messages now. They haven't really gotten much information across. Some professors may see you in more than one of their class. Some of us have the same name. It's not very effective to simply send a separate text message for everything you want to say. If you need to, take a moment before you call someone to jot down what it is you're going to ask about. You may get so involved in the conversation that you don't ask all the questions that you needed to have answered. Manage the conversation. Bring up the topics you wanted to talk about. You don't have to be aggressive, but be sure you mention what needs to be mentioned. Speaking and writing in a polite, formal way in English simply takes a lot of practice, and hopefully some of the things that we've said today will help you.
Throughout this series, we've been talking about how to be a more successful university student, and at times we've tried to look at the larger picture of how the skills you develop in university also make you a better adult and help you in your career. At this point, we would like to summarize some of the important concepts we've covered so that you can see the big picture. One thing we've tried to do is to help you see your education as something you do and less as something you receive or buy. This attitude isn't restricted to Korea. When I taught in the USA, I had many students who argued with me that they deserved A's because they had paid their tuition. Education is not a product, any more than fitness is. You must pursue it yourself. In the work world, you cannot show up when you feel like it with a lame excuse. You cannot sit back and expect things to be explained to you. You cannot take a passive approach to your work. You will lose promotions, or you may lose your job. There are enough university programs where students have these attitudes and still get good grades. They ultimately get what they pay for, a degree that indicates status but does not reflect any skills behind it, and eventually their employers notice. One of the hardest things is letting go of the high school mentality, where the teacher teaches and the student learns. You are in charge now. That's a good thing. The job of the professor is to guide the student so that the student ultimately teaches him or herself. Or, as I sometimes tell my students, a good teacher makes himself progressively unnecessary. So to review the basic principles of this course, for career and academic success, work smart and not hard, learn actively, and most importantly, think. Let's speak about ethnocentrism for a moment. There is a story, true or not, that a team of educational researchers once asked Eskimo children what these are on an IQ test. The children correctly answered, snowshoes. The researchers believed that the children had answered wrongly, for these objects, to them, were tennis rackets. But for children who live in northern Canada in a snowy world, their answer was correct. They had never seen a tennis racket, but they saw snowshoes most of the year. This is an example of ethnocentrism, which is the very human tendency to judge everything foreign by comparing it to one's own culture. If someone from the USA believes that a Korean is rude because he bows rather than shaking hands, that is an example of ethnocentrism. If a Canadian believes that a Bulgarian person is stupid because he turns his head from side to side to mean yes, that is ethnocentrism. If a Korean explains to a German that Korea is unique because it has 4 seasons, the German will laugh at him. Half the countries on the planet have 4 seasons. That is an example of ethnocentric thinking. Interacting with people who are different is also a skill involving emotional intelligence. Succeeding with foreign friends, business clients, or organizations is one part knowledge and one part people skills. People who are good at making friends and effective career relationships do these things. They make people feel comfortable. They build trust. They predict and read people's feelings and wants.
Succeeding internationally is one part knowledge and one part people skills. First, you need to recognize the situation, and then you need to act accordingly.
It is not as simple as, I know English well, and so I'll do fine in another country. You're not children, and you've likely seen Westerners in Korea do irresponsible or careless things that antagonize you or others. Knowing English is not sufficient. Equally so, the unfortunate fact is that good intentions are also not sufficient. Deeply defending someone from a different culture and saying, I didn't mean to be rude, is not going to be enough. You have the right to be yourself and be proud of your own culture. But if you interact in or with someone from a foreign country for work or serious purposes, you may also need to balance this with shrugging off the small things that offend or annoy you until you have a better understanding of why other people do what they do. Or you might ask the person, this feels strange or impolite to me. Can you please explain why this is done? You may understand the logic. At the least, you will hopefully be able to learn more patience in such situations and will be more successful at adjusting to the social rules and practices of others, and better at making friends or business colleagues.
Now, how can we build confidence when speaking? Well, first off, planning equals confidence. Decide what you're going to say. Practice how you'll deliver it. And the more you do that, the more relaxed you'll be. Think about what you will say. Who are you talking to? Is it a classmate or a professor? Is it a potential job or is it your friend? What do you want to achieve? What's your main message? Plan how you're going to say it. Remember, breathe. Introduce yourself and what you're going to talk about, and make eye contact with people in the room. Smile. Make sure you speak loud enough to be heard. Breathe, slowly and deeply. Confidence is a mental activity that only you yourself can enable. Now, if you don't feel like you have confidence, that's something you need to work on, and it will help you in your future, because confidence is something that we need in all aspects of life.
Part of succeeding in the career world, or even in university, where there are opportunities for internships, scholarships, or travel awards, involves successfully navigating interviews. Participating in an interview is an art, and like all good arts, requires some basic aptitude, but mostly practice. Some people are naturals, but even if you are shy or awkward, you can improve your interviewing skills. Many Korean interviews do not involve a great deal of conversation or interaction and focus on references and other paperwork. But increasingly, interviewers want to talk to the candidate to get an idea for his or her interest in and fit for the position. Western interviews often involve one or more of the dreaded tough questions. Before we move on to the interview questions, we'd like to give you some general pieces of advice to help you. 1. Do not memorize what you are going to say. Unless you are a professional or natural actor, Other people can usually tell very quickly that you are reciting something you have memorized, because your speech style will sound unnatural, and it may come across to them as insecure. 2. Do some basic research about the position or opportunity you are applying for.
Years ago, I was asked to sit on a departmental committee for students who wanted to go on a scholarship semester to New Zealand. One student didn't have the best grades, but talked about the things she wanted to see and do in Auckland. I've been to Auckland, and I could tell that she had done some research about actual places in the city, and I recommended her.
3. Sell yourself. No one else is going to do that for you. Promote yourself honestly, but creatively. No one likes an arrogant candidate, but this is a time for you to show your best qualities. This sort of impression you make goes far beyond the words you say. It also involves how you walk into the room, the eye contact you make, how you sit in the chair, and your general level of confidence. It's not easy to learn to be a better interviewee, and experience is the best teacher. Practicing in a classroom or with a friend can help, but you will never be as stressed or nervous as the real interview situation can involve. Nevertheless, being prepared for typical questions which may be raised can help you anticipate and reduce stress. So, let's look at some interview questions which you may hear, particularly with North American or European interviewers. Obviously, don't memorize and parrot back these answers. Rather, modify them so that they fit your own personality and speech style naturally. You are not going to get every position or opportunity you apply for, but part of being skilled at interviews is not taking every defeat personally. With experience, you can learn from your mistakes, and you can become better able to meet new interviews with greater confidence and ability.
Part of succeeding in the business world, or even here, is successfully navigating interviews. So we're going to discuss a few interview questions, which are fairly common, which are also going to help you be familiar with the types of things that interviews want to ask anyway.
Applied for 1,000 jobs in my life and likely had over 100 interviews. I was very shy when I was young, and so a lot of my interviews were disasters. But I've learned some things that work. Most of my own Korean interviews have been very fact-based and questions about specific situations or requests for paperwork. Western interviews may involve a lot of really bizarre questions such as this. If you were a bird, what type of bird would you be? If you were the size of a pencil and someone put you in a blender, what would you do? Strange questions that require you to use abstract or non-linear thinking. What is the best overall advice I can tell you about interviews? Advice I wish I had 20 years ago. confidence. One of my best friends always says, when you have an interview, walk in like you own the place. Tell them that you are interviewing them just as they are interviewing you. Employers like to see that you are confident and active. Confidence is not arrogance or rudeness. It is acting in a way that makes people believe you are competent and responsible, and it builds trust. Professor Hall and I hope that this course has been productive and useful for you. Like any teacher, we want the best for you, and we want to pass on what we know while warning you against the mistakes we have made as people who were once freshmen like you. While you are in university, don't work hard, work smart. Have fun, try new things, and do not spend your entire life looking at a computer screen. You cannot replace real friends and real experiences. And in saying that, this is the end.